But Jaxon Smith-Njigba is up next. He's up 2.2 right now at 86.6. I mean, listen, finished as a wide receiver 47 last year. He had a target share of 17% last year, which is behind, obviously, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who each had 22%. I mean, maybe you guys can talk me out of this. I don't have a lot of shares of Jackson. I'm not going to. I'm not buying into it this year. Um, there's other pass catchers around him that I would rather have. So if you want, Anthony, you can go first. I mean, if you feel this way. If you don't, then whatever. But make the case for why I should be drafting Jaxon Smith-Njigba, because I don't see, even if that target share moves a little bit between Lockett and him, because I think Metcalf goes up a bit. I don't think we're going to see a ton out of him this year, at least not consistently. Maybe a DFS guy.
If we look at Smith-Njigba last year, solid numbers, like nothing really jumps off at me. We just know he's a first-round pedigree, first receiver, go off the board, pick 20 to Seattle last year. And, it took him a little bit while to get going. No big ceiling games, just a very solid guy. But this was also a player buried kind of with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. I think another year, Tyler Lockett's a little bit older. Now, DK Metcalf is where I have a little bit of an issue with cost, and the reason why I am targeting Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Eventually, Smith-Njigba, I believe, is a more complete receiver overall. He's obviously cheaper, and I think very soon, whether it's the end of this year or in 2025, Smith-Njigba is the number one. He's the alpha in this wide receiver room. Now, DK Metcalf, he's expensive. He's expensive for a player where, if you go back to 2020, he was a wide receiver 10 in points per game. He had an amazing year, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, 15-plus yards per catch. He actually had 15-plus yards per catch in each of his first two seasons. Replicated that finally last year. Last year, wide receiver 22 in points per game. 2022, the 24. Then he was a 20 again. He's never been anywhere close to that wide receiver 10-point per game player in now 3 seasons. And I think fantasy managers, right, they like the flag plant. They're still chasing that season. Meanwhile, we have 3 seasons since where he has not been close. And my reasoning is I'm not going to draft him at cost. I'm going to go get who I believe is the second best receiver with a chance to be just as productive in this wide receiver room, and that's JSN. Now, they are going to have more opportunity. They bring in Grubb from Washington. They're going to throw the hell out of the football, and I think Geno Smith is very much capable. At worst, even if they ever did go to Sam Howell, he was bad NFL quarterback, but he put up some decent fantasy numbers last year. So I'm okay with the quarterback position. I love the offensive system change, getting away from Pete Carroll. So this is JSN's more of a cost play for me, where instead of getting DK Metcalf, I'd rather go for the second guy in the pecking order, who I believe is JSN. Where's DK going? Like, he's going around Mike Evans, Nico Collins.
Third round.
Yeah, like Nico was a top
Cooper
12
Kupp.
receiver last year, right? Like Cooper Kupp, Devonta Smith, Michael Pittman. Like, I'd rather have all of those guys over DK Metcalf. And again, I don't, until I see otherwise, it's 3 years removed from a wide receiver 10 in points per game season that he's finished wide receiver 20 or worse.
Steve, you got
to me,
on
he's
this?
closer to that that player than when he was in his second year.
Sorry, Anthony, for
no, it's fine. No.
All right.
Yeah, JSN seems like one of those guys that the fantasy community just is enamored with, and I do think he's a talented player. We've seen him have some big time catches last year, and then also in college playing alongside Garrett Wilson and stuff. I mean, he was like one of the most productive receivers in Ohio State. So, how does he convert now into this offense in his second year? With this guy Grubb, who comes over from Washington, Ryan Grubb, who had 3 good receivers in McMillan, Odunze, and Jalen Polk. And I kind of see like DK is kind of like the Odunze, although he's a little bit faster. And then you got Polk is kind of like the JSN, and then McMillan is kind of like the Lockett. Lockett's kind of like the deep guy. So, I mean, I could see a world where all three of these guys are productive, but yeah, Lockett is getting older. He's 31, 32 years old now. His numbers weren't great last year. I think DK, has he plateaued as a player, or can he continue to get better? I mean, he came in as a very raw prospect. He still is an athletic freak, 6'4", 235. So maybe we haven't seen DK's best year, but maybe we have. And I do think there's a world where maybe JSN, just like Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit, just gets fed targets and just produces. So that is quite possible too. I haven't taken a ton of JSN, but I am a little bit intrigued. There's still some questions. Now, he had a lot of success at Washington, this guy Grubb, but it's his first year in the NFL. Is his system going to adapt to the NFL automatically? We don't know that. The Seattle offensive line is not great. Geno took a step back last year as well. So there's some questions overall about this offense, but I will grab a little bit of JSN, just not a lot.
Before we get to the next player, Pete, I'll kick this to you because you did flash it on the screen, so I figured maybe you'd be interested in addressing it. Then we will get to a comment from our resident troll, which is for Anthony. But Pete, as long as you don't sound like Darth Vader, which I hopefully don't think you will, even though right now you're frozen, so this seems promising.
Jesus.
I'm
there
here.
you are.
I'm here. I just took my charger out.
Oh, okay. Chris O is saying he would rather pick up Dell over Collins at his ADP. I mean, this is kind of, because we talk about ADP and you have to make a decision. Who would you rather have at their cost? This is kind of why we do this show. So, Pete, I'll kick this to you because you kind of made a head nod there. You'd rather pick up Dell over Collins at his ADP with the Houston Texans. What says you?
This is a really tough one for me. I've always been a Nico guy. I love Nico Collins. I mean, I'll stick with my gut and say Nico. But I am very nervous about Nico's price at this point. I was hoping as we got closer to draft season, that things would change. We talked about it. We hoped that all of them would slip and Nico could maybe get to the third round. I'm shocked it hasn't adjusted, given that there's three dominant ball, receivers in this offense. Nico's not a dominant, but Diggs and Diggs and Nico, I thought we were going to see a shift, kind of like the Bears, where you see Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, or DJ's in the third round. I think people are enamored by the youth of Nico, and it does worry me at his cost. With where he's going, I'm starting to lean off of taking Nico, which is hard for me to say because I am a Nico truther. I might lean Dell. It just depends on where I am in the draft. If I've taken an elite wide receiver round one, like an AJ Brown, I'm not taking Nico at his cost, and I'll probably maybe take a swing on more of a safer guy, as crappy as that sounds. I'll probably take a shot on like a Deebo Samuel at this point over Nico. If I have an elite wide receiver, if I take running back round one, I don't mind taking a chance on Nico because I feel like the upside is there. But it's definitely a tough situation. I'm kind of upset that the ADP hasn't really shifted a ton at this point in the season.